Good afternoon. This is Jon Stephens, the 2020 United Way Board Chair, and I'm here with my friend Kevin McConic, who's on the board and is the chair of the Community Impact Division for the United Way. And we wanted to just come together today to kind of start a dialogue about what's going on in our world today. And Kevin and I have known each other since, I don't even know when, probably 15 years.
It's been a long time.
Yeah, we've been working together by and large in the United Way campaign and on the board, and Kevin is a member and a leader in this organization, the 100 Black Men of West Texas, which is a great organization. Kevin is a very well respected individual. He works at Covenant Health Systems, and Kevin's just a great guy, but has a lot on his heart, just like we all do right now. And we felt like this is the right time for us to get together and start a conversation about how we can, as a community, move forward and work together and hopefully, come up with some ideas and things that we can just do better for all of us. And as the board chair of the United Way, we're going to be meeting in our board meeting next week, and we're going to have some of these conversations with our board and do some things and implement some ad hoc committees to deal with some of the issues that have been around for as long as I've lived, but that have recently come back to the surface. And so, Kevin, thanks for being here today. Thanks for really probably being the initial driving force in doing this. And so, yeah, I'll just let you kind of turn it over to you right now.
Yeah, so I appreciate this. Been a part of United Way, like you said, for a long time, and really have grown in this organization. I think really the best organization that I've ever been a part of as far as nonprofit and its leadership and its board leadership as well as staff is phenomenal. And the reality is United Way does some really, really good stuff, and I'm proud to be a part of that. I talk to people about it all the time. And when I say good, I think it's relative, right? And so doesn't mean that we don't have some areas to grow in and areas to get better in, and we think at this kind of flashpoint moment in time that this is a great opportunity for us to really have dialogue and start talking about it, and looking at things from the eye and the lens of diversity, equity, inclusion, social justice, and those things. I heard Tim Duncan years ago talking to his dad, or talking about his dad, and something he used to say to him all the time, just with respect to the word good. Good is good, it's okay, but he said good, better, best. Never let it rest until your good is better and your better is best. And so I think we have an opportunity, while I think we do a lot of things good at United Way, the impacts that we've made that I've seen, I'm proud to be a part of, but we want to get to better and best, and I think that's gonna be something that we're striving to do. So glad to be a part of that. So we do a lot of wonderful things in the community, and so just really glad to have this dialogue and opportunity to really have one of maybe many as we kind of dive into this really tough work of a dialogue.
Absolutely. So, well, do you want to? I mean, I would defer to you to go ahead and kind of lead us off. I know that you've got a lot on your heart right now. And,
well, let me just start with we all should have a lot on our heart right now.
Absolutely.
We've got a lot going on in our community, a lot going on. And when I say community, not just Lubbock, but the larger community in the United States and America. And we know again that we are at a flashpoint moment. We're at a tipping point, and we've seen things kind of escalate, and really specifically from the Black community, it's, man, golly, when is enough? And so certainly it's been exciting and great to see our white counterparts really stand up and speak out and say this is wrong. We've got to do something different. Now we're at a point where I think we start with this tough dialogue with what do we do? What are the tactics? What are the solutions? Based on what we see, based on the data that we know is there, all the disparities that exist in criminal justice, in policing, in education, economically, there's a lot of those things that we have to look at. And so I think it's critical that we start the dialogue and conversation, but not just start the dialogue, not just talk about it, not just have it continue, but that we get to some actionable things that we can do that are some hard things. And I think some of those things is recognizing and looking at really what is diversity, what is equity, what is inclusion, what is racism really. And so, you know, and for me, they're really simple definitions on when you think about diversity. It's just the presence of difference, you know. I remember one of my bosses years ago, great guy, love him. One of my bosses, we went to a funeral of one of our black coworkers, and he was the only white person in the room. And he said, when we got back, he said, "Man, Kevin, that was kind of weird. I was the only white person there." And I turned and looked at him and I said, "Well, you do recognize that most of what I enter into as far as meetings and rooms, I'm the only black person."
Yeah.
And he said, "You know what? I just never really thought about it." And I think that's the reality. I think that these experiences that we have, that we don't really think about. You know, we don't think about the implicit bias and some of the things that kind of go along with that. So really, diversity is just the presence of difference, and it's certainly race and it's ethnicity and those things, but it's difference is just difference. I mean, it could be all sorts of things. And so that then you have equity, and equity is just giving people what they need, you know. And so and that's a big part of the conversation. We used to say equality a lot, and I think equality is one thing, but I think what we're really after is equity. And I think I don't think African Americans are by and large are asking for some you know, big handout or anything like that. We're asking for equity. Just give us the ability to start where you start, you know. And so when I think about equity, it's just, if I went to a community that nobody had shoes, okay, and it was moms, dads, daughters, sons, and they had no shoes, and I wanted to give them all shoes. Equality says, hey, I'm going to give them all a pair of size 8s. But equity says, I'm going to give them the size they need, and that's what equity is to me. And then you have the whole idea of inclusion, and inclusion is not only being invited to the table, which I am very often at this point, but it's also having, when you get invited to the table, your opinion valued, and that people look onto you as a person that belongs there. And so that's what inclusion is about. It's not just being invited to the dance, but it's being invited to dance. And so I don't know if you have any thoughts on those things.
Yeah, no, I mean, I really, those are great ways to explain, you know, equity, inclusion. We haven't talked about social justice yet, but, you know, one of the things I feel like, you know, the elephant in the room is the racism part.
Yeah.
You know, racism has existed in this country and continues to exist, and it's racism is evil. Mm-hmm. It's not biblical. It's purely evil. Okay. And I feel, you know, it's disappointing to me. It's heartbreaking to me that friends of mine have to deal with racism. And I know that, you know, the white community, for, you know, in the history of the white community, that racism has been a prominent characteristic of my ancestors, right? And it's you know, while I, you know, it's interesting to me that, you know, and we'll talk about it here in a minute, you know, what about, you know, George Floyd's murder what has been different about it than some of the other police brutality and the killings, you know, of black men? What's been the difference, and what's kind of set it off? But, you know, I think we got to deal with the racism part, yeah. And really come to an understanding, at least, of, you know, we got to acknowledge the past for sure. But, you know, personally, you know, I feel like I've always grown up with you know, different races, friends of different races, you know, blacks, Hispanics, you know, Asian, and you know, I've been taught, and I've been maybe not taught's the right word, but I've been I guess I've been included, you know, in the households of different races, and I don't, you know, necessarily see people, you know, and judge them by the skin, the color of their skin. I judge them, you know, by the content of their heart, by the things that we do have in common. But I don't, you know, it doesn't go unnoticed that I know that I don't have to deal with some of the issues that you got to deal with, and that other races has to deal with, and I don't pretend to understand, you know, what you have to go through on a daily basis, and so.
Yeah, I think understanding of yourself and understanding of history and you know, history of all these things, recognizing, like you said, the past history of racism, but there's a present history of racism. I think recognizing that really racism is not so much about individuals, you being a good person and having good intentions and a good heart, but it's about how we're socialized into this world, specifically in the United States, to believe certain things, right? And nobody's really explicitly saying most of the time these things, but implicitly we learn how we should be, where we should be, how we should react in the workplace, which, you know, and anywhere else. And so that's really important to understand. I think, you know, Dr. D'Angelo in her book was talking about, in her book White Fragility, which is it's a tough book for me, but I think it's a lot of good stuff, as you kind of mentioned. We talked about that a little bit earlier, but she talked about racism. The analogy she gave was really this of it being a kind of like a dock on a lake, and she talked about the fact that as you look at racism, you see it there. If you look objectively, you know it's there, but you really only see what's above the water. Really, you only see that part of it. And so, but racism, what really is dangerous about racism and is about the structural presence below the water and all the beams that go down, that they go down to the floor of that water, and that they even have footing that goes even much deeper into that to hold it up. So it's a structure and it's a systematic things that really hold up racism that are, again, not explicitly said, but it's there. And then we're all, white people, black people, Hispanic, we're all socialized into that. And so one of the things that I recognize for me is that early on that I learned, after thinking about this things years later, I was being socialized into this idea, this thought that black people were inferior as a black person, which is as tough as a kid. Not something I verbalized, but I thought about it, and I can think about now all other black kids and how they think about these things. And that's why I think the pathology is so important. Of the history of this decision making that happens, right? But you know, I thought, man, why are my teachers white for the most part? Why do white people have better cars and better homes? And why, when I go to the doctor, I only see white people? Or when I look at professional roles and when I look at television, you know, the shows I used to like, you know, man, there weren't any black people on those shows. When we did see depictions of black people, why did we see it's ghetto, and you know, why was that? And really what it led me to believe is nobody told me this, was that black people didn't work as hard, and that we were lazy, and that we didn't do the things we needed to do to, so to speak, pull ourselves up by the bootstraps. We didn't work hard enough. And Martin Luther King said it really well. It's one of the things that made me really start thinking about, you know, it's a crazy shame to have people, to tell people pull themselves up by the bootstrap when they don't have any boots, you know. And so it's a lot of different things. It's learning yourself, it's learning history, it's recognizing the numbers don't lie, the data is clear, you know, about all the things that are going on and how it's going on. And certainly I feel like there is some accountability, some level of accountability in the African American community that needs to be had. But by and large, I think a lot of what goes on and has gone on is because of lack of jobs and lack of social structure lack of educational opportunities. You know, those type things are keys to you getting out of these structures and this poverty, you know, that you live in and that we've lived in, that I grew up in, an abject poverty. And so that's important. People ask me all the time, white people ask me, well, Kevin, didn't you grow up in the same way? Why are you different? And the reality is I'm not different. You know, I'm really not different. There may be some personal choices that were a little different, although I've made a lot of bad choices. But I think I'm just the same, and I've been lucky. I've learned how to live within it, you know, and recognize it, and really hopefully have a high emotional intelligence high enough to say, because I'm not that smart, but emotional intelligence high enough to say when, where, how, why, you know. But at this point, I've got to also recognize I've got to speak up and I've got to speak out because my voice matters. And so the same way I need to do that is the same way you need to do that as a white person. And the best way I can do that is by having a conversation with people that I have influence with, that don't think like me, look like me, act like me, experience like me. So
yeah. Well, you know, one of the things I think that, you know, Glenn Cochran and I have talked about is, you know, clearly the United Way is not a race. You know, racism has no place in the work that the United Way does and that our partner agencies do. We do a lot. You know, our community partner agencies do a lot of work with individuals that are impacted by racism, for sure. I think you're right in the fact that, you know, racism has had an impact on a lot of the inequity and social problems that face our community, and these conversations are exactly, I agree with you, that what we need to be having right now to try to make a difference. Mm-hmm. You know, it's unfortunate that we can't just wipe racism off of the face of this earth, you know. Mm-hmm. But we got to figure out how to minimize its impact on the community, on the black community, on the Hispanic community, on the minority community, and we need to figure out how to make things better and more equitable, like you're talking about. So I want to kind of just go back, and I'm curious your thoughts on, you know, in the current environment that we're in, what do you think is the kind of catalyst that sparked, you know, the revolution almost in this country at this moment, as opposed to, you know, I don't know how many times it's happened in the past. I mean, a lot. And
well, I do think it's been there and it's pent up. You know, pressure bursts the pipe, right? Yeah. And so I think we're at a point, like you said, a tipping point, a boiling point, that you know, people really absolutely are fed up with having to, when I walk out, really justify that I'm where I'm supposed to be and I'm doing what I'm supposed to do without this prejudgment that happens. One of my friends said that he was helping a friend whose car stopped, went and got him some gas. They were driving to his house in the neighborhood in South Lubbock, and a black guy and the car stopped again in a little, you know, a few blocks away from his house. And he said as he got out of his car, it's 11, 12 at night, and he's in his own neighborhood, and he's afraid that someone might call the police on him, or might think he's out of place, or might be doing something he's not supposed to do. Yeah. And so you have that stuff. So I think it's there, it's been there all along. I think that right now is an opportunity to seize, and that's what people are doing. And what we see, which is wonderful, is that we see our white counterparts, you know, and we see that our Hispanic counterparts, and that we're standing up in solidarity together. We're saying that this is enough. We can't, and people are saying, even white people are saying, man, that's just no good. We can't have that. We can't keep seeing this. Right. And I think one of the things that has helped is relationships. As I know, for years, I've been having these dialogues one-on-one with people or in small groups with my white friends that sometimes differ in opinion and their experience and all that a whole lot. But the one thing that they can grab a hold of when I talk to them is when I say, think about George Floyd's, think about that being me. What if that was your friend Kevin that you love, that you care about? What if that was me with the guys with the policeman's knee on my neck,
Right.
and I'm begging for reprieve, right? What if it was my son Dion? What if it was him? And I think one of the best things we can do is, John, is if I can get up from the place I sit and from holding on to the beliefs I have, and if I can sit in your seat and understand from where you come, from whence you come, and I can understand and see through the lens you see. Because we could be looking at the exact same thing, and our experience with that, our experiences in life and what we've gone through inform how we think about that. And we might be looking at the exact same thing and have total opposite opinions of it, and you see that all the time. What I've learned is that that's valid. And I used to say it wasn't, because I said that this is what I see, this is what I'm experiencing. You just don't see it, right? But you see it from a different way because of a lot of different things. And so the thing I've got to do is say what you see is valid. Let me try to understand it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of times what white people don't do is not try to understand, again, all this that comes with it. And I will say, I think the black community doesn't do that well when it comes to the white community, okay? Just this is the conversation right now. And so I want to have really, really tough dialogue and conversations. I mean, stuff that at the end of the day, we may not agree, but I respect you like crazy. But here's the experience I have, and that you validate that, that you validate my experience, and then I do the same for you. So building bridges and making sure that we have mutual respect for one another, and that our common goal, whether you agree on necessarily how we get there, is that we get there when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, and social justice. That's the thing, all right? Are we gonna do what's right and good, or are we gonna do what's convenient?
Right.
Okay, and right now, convenient is to let the conversation die. Convenient is to not drive in this direction. The right thing to do, the thing according to the Word of God and how we love each other, the right thing to do is for us to live into this thing together and walk together in solidarity toward it. And I think we can do that. And so I just think it's a tipping point. I think, there's a place and time that now is intended for us, if we take advantage of it, that we can change the absolute world. That George Floyd's death and many others won't be in vain. And that we see, like his little daughter said, my daddy changed the world, and like the pastor Wells in Houston said the other day at that funeral, you'll be a prophet, young lady, hopefully.
Yeah.
That's what we want to see.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you that, it is, and I said this earlier, me as a white man, and I'm just speaking personally, I know I can't understand what you as a black man go through with regard to stepping out of your house in your own neighborhood and being looked at by other, in large part, white people, and the thing that they think is, what's going on, who is this, why are they here, if they don't know you.
Yeah.
It's a terrible place to be, and it's heartbreaking for me to hear that you go through that a lot of, black men in this community go through, a lot that I really know well, and respect, and it's something that, we do need to change. We do need to talk about it. And I've probably been, I haven't done as good of a job probably of talking about that. But the equity part has, been on my heart over the last couple of years to think about, okay, how do we get incomes up, for the black community?
It matters.
And how do we get incomes up for the Hispanic community, and to where it's more of an equal, and we've got to figure something out. Our elected officials have to talk about this, and they need people from the community to come in with ideas and how to help with this.
So one of the things to me is people that you're trying to help have to be a part of the solution.
Sure.
They have to be in the room.
Yeah.
And again, a lot of the places where I go, where the power is, we're not in the room. You know what I mean? And if we are in the room, it's not an inclusive room where really your opinion really matters. And so we have to be able to be in the room. We have to we have to have our opinion be validated. And sometimes, man, it is, it's tough. When you start recognizing and realizing you work in banking, and you know the history of banking when it comes to redlining, and the numbers bear it out, like in all these different things. I mean, as much as you want to say this, that, or the other, all you have to do is look at data, and the data is strong, it's evident, it's clear that there's inequity. And so, like I said, some of that, well, credit's bad, and you can't, credit's bad, but that's, how do we fix that? Some of that is, you don't have the right education to get this role, right? How do we fix that? Because those are kind of social, educational inequities that happen that are reality, but we need to kind of move back and we really need to invest in and decide. And it's going to cost a lot of time, money, energy, effort to get where we need to get to. And where I'll see and where I think the black community will really, we'll believe that there's a change absolutely going to happen when there's money and then when there's resources and then there's a sustained, viable effort put on the table that we see. If we're ever going to get to the home of the brave and the land of the free, if we're ever going to get to the equitable state that we say we are, who we are in our community, that's what it's going to take. And so that's just got to happen. I think it's important that companies, corporations speak out. I mean, it's just not right to have. It's all right to speak out on right. You know what I mean? And I think some places have not done that. Some major players in our city. I'm so glad the United Way has said, you know what, we're going to stand against inequity. We're going to stand against injustice. We know that police officers, by and large, are great. They're doing what they're supposed to do. The ones I come in contact with, by and large, are respectful and doing what they're supposed to do. But we also know that we've had a plethora of black men specifically that have been killed by police and haven't been held accountable for that. Sure. And that's the problem. It's not so much, and really even when people bring in this conversation even about, well, they shouldn't have been doing what they're doing. Well, maybe not, but should they be dead is the question, right? Yeah. And so it's a lot of that conversation I know we'll get a little deeper into. We'll dive further into pathologies. We'll dive into kind of the reasons why, this conversation is so hard. And so I look forward to that and bringing other people into that dialogue. So.
Good. Well, one of the things, and I mentioned this earlier, is, we're going to meet as a board next week. And, three of the main focuses that the United Way have right now is, child abuse, it's mental health, and it's sex trafficking. Sure. And I really feel that the social inequities that we talked about needs to be put higher on the priority list. Sure. And so we're going to talk about that next week in our board meeting and have an open dialogue with our board about, how do we do that? How do we make that one of these more important major focuses of the United Way? Mm-hmm. And what can we do to help with that? The United Way has a powerful voice.
Absolutely.
And we can use that voice, I think, to help with these social inequities, because I really do believe that a lot of the problems in the black community is related to poverty. Yeah. And we've got to address that and figure out how to alleviate that problem. And I think, and I agree with you, I think you said it, that it would have a big impact, I believe. Yeah. But it is going to take corporations. It is going to take elected officials. It is going to take representatives from every race and background to come together to figure out. Yeah. It's not an easy issue.
Oh gosh, this is, I think, socially, I think societally, that this is probably our toughest task. It's the hardest problem to solve. Yeah. I think we have more people with more of a heart to work toward it, look at it, but it's going to take a whole lot more. I mentioned a little bit earlier before we started recording that just when there's something set in motion, poverty, racism, inequity, social injustice, lack of diversity, equity, and inclusion, when those things are rolling downhill and they're in motion, there takes something much greater, or at least equal to that, but generally much greater, to stop that roll, to stop that slide, and that's what we have to have, and that is corporations, and that is individuals that are in power, and that is our elected officials. You know, I'd like to see our elected officials speak out and say, hey, this is wrong, this is bad. You know, I don't think that's not a conservative or a liberal thing to be. It's a right thing, and so we need to see that. We need to see people stand up against what that is, but also, like I said, stand up and say that we have some solidarity in this. We're not going to tear down every police officer or everything, but we do know that racism is deeply rooted in a lot of institutions. We know that, and so and it causes inequities that are great. And so I hope that our dialogue continues and really spurs not only more conversation, but actionable tactics and solutions and engagement from our community leaders, our community businesses, that really we can see some change that is absolutely needed and necessary and right to do so.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your time, Kevin, and I appreciate your friendship. I appreciate the man that you are, the leader in our community that you are, and what you stand for and believe in.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I can tell you that for me personally, I feel this. I'm on board with all of that.
Yeah.
With where you're trying to work towards and where you're trying to steer, this conversation and steer the change that's needed. I'm with you on this, and that I'm looking forward to being a part of the solution and being involved in what we need to do to kind of reverse, the centuries of racism and social inequities and injustices and things. And so, but I love you as a brother, and I hope I'm excited to carry on this conversation.
Yeah, I love you too. I do. We've known each other for a long time. We've worked together for a long time. I know your heart. I know your motive, and that's important. And like I said, that really helps. And so this dialogue, this conversation really starts off something really that it's a catalyst for what's to come. And I have great hope in that we'll do something great together. Maybe we'll see some of this come to fruition in our lifetime. I think this is a long, hard road, but I think that there's some things that we can do right away, and I think that there's some things we can set in place to start dismantling the structure, the all that's below and beneath the surface, and it's hard stuff. And I know that probably you and I will even have just as we dig just really tough conversations, and that's necessary. Iron sharpens iron, and you've heard that term. But for iron to be sharpened, for a knife to be sharpened, it has to go against another hard surface, right?
That's right.
And so I think that's what it is. We're both iron, and what will come out of that is with a better tool, a better way to cut through some of all the nonsense and that gets politicized, and all sorts of things that happen. I hope to cut through some of that because we're willing to have real, honest, hard conversations, and I think this is just the beginning. But we'll see in these conversations that we'll dig into some of those things and maybe get down into the down and dirty of it, and hopefully that'll help us all at the end of the day. So I appreciate you. I appreciate United Way and staff for opening this forum, and again, just hope it really lends itself to some really great outcomes at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Well, to those of you who are watching, just to let you know, this is the start of this conversation that we're going to have. We're going to bring more individuals into these one-on-one conversations and get some different perspectives to really try to learn and understand and hopefully create some change. And the United Way, like I said, is going to be meeting about this. The United Way has always been a very diverse organization. But I think the time is now for the United Way to tackle this issue of social inequity. And we're going to talk about it next week at our board meeting. And so I'm looking forward to the conversations with Kevin, the future conversations, and hope that we can hear from you and get feedback from you as well. And so appreciate your attention and you watching, and we will look forward to carrying this conversation on in the future. So thank you.
Thank you.